is the rest of the nation is way more divided. And like we said, is that's why I love how you're doing this. I love, as I shared with you, how much I love how you're doing this independent journalism, is because in the public journalism is it is constantly negative bullshit one time after another, and it's just over and over and over, and people get so sick of that. That's why people hate politics, is because they see that negative over and over.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. In the past, we've discussed issues as the laws that affect them go through the legislative process. But what hasn't been made clear is how the actual legislative process works, at least here in the state of Utah, as each state has their own constitution and their own legislative process that forms the laws in their state. So, here to clarify all of that is Jayden Laursen, who's been active in politics here in Utah, working on campaigns and in the Utah state legislature. Jayden, thank you for being here today.
You bet. Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
So, first, let me ask what got you interested in politics?
Yeah, so when I was little, it really started really young. As I just had this fascination with history, and I loved history. And then when I was a, I was kind of strange. I would build the White House and different White House monuments and the Washington D.C. monuments with my building blocks when I was 4 years old, and I just loved history and I loved learning about it. And when I was younger, I had just moved to a new elementary school and was really bullied, and I was really picked on. And I made a promise to myself. Many of the recesses, I mean, dead honest, there was one person maybe in the school who liked me. Everyone else was a huge hater and did not like me in the slightest. And I made myself the promise when I was sitting at recess, I would look out at the kids on the playground. And my promise was that I wanted to get into politics to give the kids like me and the people like me who felt they didn't have a voice and that they didn't feel seen, that I could be their voice and that I could be their friend.
So, um, talk about your, because you said you used to work for, according to your bio, you used to work for Senator Chris Wilson. Now, for those who don't know, he's a local politician who represents portions of Salt Lake County in District 2. How did you get involved with his office?
He's been since being in politics. So I got originally involved with Dan Johnson's administration, and then he became a really good friend. And so Chris was campaigning or starting his campaign off for re-election, and I told him I would be happy to campaign for him because he is such a great guy. And then he reached back out, and I got to be over his campaign this last election season, which was really, really fun and really a special and very unique experience. And I just had a blast, and it meant the world having Chris give me that opportunity.
So, Senator Wilson's title in the legislature right now is Majority Whip. What exactly is that?
Yes, so in the legislature, all of them have different leadership. So they have that in the House of Representatives as well, where they have the House Majority Leader and the House Majority Whip. And he's, in a way, the best way to kind of explain it is he's the vice president of the leadership. So he's the one who he works. He's got a lot more. He's been so busy with it recently, where regular senators and reps, their schedules are very busy, but they're not as committed with things. So the people in leadership, they are really really on the bills. They pay attention to them 10 times more. They pay attention to the behind the scenes of what they could do to get this certain bill passed. And especially each party has a majority whip and a majority leader. And so lots of bills focused on parties, they are the ones that take them and run and usually meet with others in discussing them.
So, you used to work up on Capitol Hill, correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I was with Dan Johnson when he was on Capitol Hill.
That's right. So, describe a typical day working in the legislature.
Well, I would say that anybody who's been an intern, especially, is for me. I was lucky because I was just with Dan Johnson in his administration, so most of the work I did was up here in the valley. But the days that I would go down there with him, is it's very busy, and especially with Dan Johnson, he was always running and always going. And but a typical day is they always rise early. It's usually 6 a.m. I know that some meetings even start around 7 or so. The speakers breakfast that they do every year, that starts around 6 a.m. And so it's usually very early mornings, and then it's very busy throughout the day. You're constantly going from the Senate building to the House building to the Capitol and back and forth. Floor time, which is when they vote on the bills, they speak on the bills, is actually very rare, and especially in the beginning of the session, is it's not really going on until about about till the end of the session is when they really start to crack down, and that's when floor time's going. But the interns are constantly running. I love those guys. Is I mean, they are just constantly working, and constantly they're the people behind the scenes that nobody sees, that they are doing work like nonstop. And the reps are pretty busy, but they got nothing on the interns. The interns are the ones that do the groundwork and the dirty work. And the reps, they a lot of them, it's very unique to what they want to accomplish in their administration. So, for example, a few of my friends who um, I'll name Mike Peterson. He's very busy with faith-centered bills, and that's kind of his area. Where Trevor Lee is more focused on conservative bills, and it's kind of very personal. It's their bills are personal to them, and it's what they want to see made differences in the world, and especially in the state.
We're going to talk about that later on, but you had mentioned the interns as sort of the unsung heroes of the legislature. What sort of work do interns do?
Yes, so they are the ones that do. They're honestly, like, if it was a musical theater, it would honestly be them. They're the behind the scenes people. They're the ones who are reaching out to different people to connect with meetings with the reps. They're the ones who connect the schedule for the reps. They're the ones that plan the schedule for the rep. They're the ones that really are kind of this. They're a secretary mixed with the intern mixed with, they do all sorts of work, and I've seen them do all sorts of things, especially with their they really help the things that the reps don't have time for. They take care of. So if they need to um, reach out to a constituent about an issue, they're the ones that do it usually, because the reps are very busy, and they're the ones that schedule the meetings and take care of the behind the scenes stuff. Is really, they do all the work. If it, in my opinion, they do all the work, and the reps are the ones who they not so much take the credit, but they're the ones that are seen for what they do rather than the interns.
So, just with that, I don't know if it's maybe too early to ask, but how are decisions made uh, with all of that work?
Yeah, so it's a lot of meetings, is and it's more of what's been special to me is being behind the scenes and seeing the personal meetings, because lots of the reps become really good friends. And so you have a committee that meets on bills, but that's only half of it. It's very unique and very special to me, because behind the scenes in the speakers' chambers or in the during lunches, is it's really special, because just sitting around the table, they're just sitting and talking, and it's so cool because they'll sit and talk about friends and family, and they'll visit about that. But then they'll start talking about different bills, and it's really, I think people see the um, very fighting side of politics, but with those like luncheons and meetings, is it's really friendly and it's very personal, and even people who don't agree, they can still talk to each other, and I think that's really unique and really special, especially in today's politics.
So here's a question that that I've wondered. for a while now, which is what is the difference between the House and the Senate in the legislature?
Yes, that's a great question, and that's a really good one because like you said, is lots of people don't understand their roles and why we have one and then also have to have the other. And it's honestly kind of a check and balance situation. Is it's just like with the governor and the secretary of the treasury and the state auditor, they're the executive branch, and then with the House and the Senate is they really check each other. So if you have a bill that passes in the House, it goes to the Senate, but the Senate can check that bill, and if there's wording or if there's issues or anything, they can actually send it back to the House and have them fix the wording, fix the issues that are in the bill, and then they can actually have it move forward in the Senate.
Somebody told me once that one of the other differences was between the House and the Senate was jurisdiction and term limits. Is that? Can you clarify that, please?
Yes, I believe reps are only 2 years, and now that you say that, yes, senators are usually 4 years.
So we're going to start at the beginning. Okay, there is somebody who wants to pass a law, so they want to, introduce a bill. So talk about that process when the minute a bill gets entered into the legislature and all the way through, what happens?
Yeah, so the very first step is the rep. Usually, I know for a few of my friends who are reps, they usually reach out to the people that the bill will affect. So if the bill's gonna, for example, I know one of the reps, he has a team of attorneys that he'll write up a draft for a bill, or he'll explain what he wants to do in a bill, and then he'll reach out to this group of attorneys, and he'll have them go through the bill and make sure all of it's legal, make sure that it makes sense, make sure that it won't conflict with different laws already made. And so that will be the very first process of you have this idea. Now what are you going to write in it, what you're going to put in it, and it's it's got to be very detailed, because with words you could write no taxes at all and put that in a bill, but then you don't know what you have to have it very detailed. You have to have um, who it will affect, what it will do, and to the T. I mean, some of those bills are pages and pages long and just line after line. And then that's also another thing that interns do, is they actually read the bills that lots of the reps kind of don't have time for. But what so after they do that process of meeting with those who will the bill affect, who will it hurt, and what could it do, even if they love this bill and they have a positive view, it's always good, in my personal opinion, when they reach out to who it's going to affect, on the other side, whether it's the different party or whether it's someone that the bill kind of targets in a way, and just kind of see what their reason for and why they're against the bill and why they would be against it. And then you write up the bill and you approach it in committee. And so committee is there's the out of the top of my head, there's the committee over education, law enforcement, environmental, and then there's different ones, and those are put together by the Speaker of the House and the leadership, and they put together these committees. And that's where, if your bill falls under that category. So Trevor Lee, he just did a bill that only the American flag was allowed in schools in the state of Utah, along with the Utah state flag, and that was it. No protests and no other flags were allowed. And he did that in the education committee because it fall under education. And so after the committee passes that, if the committee passes it, then it goes to the House, and it will be voted on in the House. And then if it passes the House, which usually there's debate, it's very rare that there are a few bills, but it's very rare that there's not even debate between the Republicans. So even a Republican will stand up against a Republican and say, "Well, hey, what did line 52 mean when it said this?" And then he'll respond, And it's kind of interesting because honestly, what I've noticed, especially this session, is it's very rare that it's a party based bill that they fight each other on. Usually it is just a Republican and a Republican who are standing up and they're like, hey, I got this question. Or I've even seen Democrats stand up and say, hey, I got this question against line 15. What does this mean? And they clarify it, and then they're very friendly. It's very rare that there's ever a fight. And then they send that to the Senate, and then the Senate is usually a bill has a sponsor, which will be a senator, and then a there's a member of the House that did the bill together. And so usually the senator and the that had sponsored that bill will present it in the Senate and say, "Hey, this is the bill I've been working on with the House." And then if they don't like it, like I said previously, if they don't like a certain line, I've seen that a lot this year actually, is if they don't like a certain line, they send it back to the House and they're like, "Hey, we don't like this in particular. Could you refrain it? Can you get rid of it?" And then the House says, "Hey, this is we just already voted on this, had him change this line, la di da di day," and then they send it back to the Senate, and then it gets voted on, and then it gets sent to the governor for signature.
Just out of curiosity, are there ever times, at least from what you've seen in your experience, where there is a bipartisan bill that is supported by both?
Oh yes, yes. There's it's actually very unique in Utah because that's actually very common. Is I know Dan Johnson actually ran a lot. A lot of his biggest thing about being in politics was it was never a political issue. It was always to help people, and it was always to care for people. And so his was very unique because I can recall most of his bills were bipartisan. That most of his had the entire House vote yes on. And I know that there was I've seen about three or four bills, I can't remember them correctly right now, this year alone that had complete bipartisan. And it's cool when you're sitting on the floor because there's some bills that when the person presents them, they get so emotional that it really draws everybody's attention in. And there's been some bills that I've seen that within seconds of voting opening up, that everybody's lit up green. Everybody votes yes, and it's like that. And so it's very unique to see so many different things that the House does come together on and completely agree with.
It's nice to hear. So, you mentioned committees earlier. So, how do they work within the legislature, and how do they shape the legislation or law?
Yeah, so the committees are put up of reps is usually I know there's some that have senators on them, but in particular usually it's a House of Representatives, at least from my standpoint that I've seen, is it's really unique because the leadership and usually puts together people who have been in that. So, like in education, I believe all of them have been teachers at one time. And so they do that. And then the law enforcement is officers and different people who have been on that. And then the environmental are people who have been very passionate on that. So it's very smartly put together by leadership. And they really put a lot of thought into it and put a lot of thought into who could contribute, what could they say. So I know Dan Johnson, he was a principal for many years, and he was on the education committee, and he brought a different perspective, so to say, than a teacher. So a rep that has been a teacher for years, they've seen as a teacher, but then the principal has this view of, well, I've been doing this over this. And then Dan Johnson was also a supervisor for a district, and so he was able to bring that perspective. And so they sit there and they debate. A lot of them ask questions back and forth. But the cool thing about committee is you show up to committee, the rep brings up the opinion or the bill that he wants to pass. And then it's really cool because then they open it for public comment. And they usually allow everybody, unless it's a very controversial bill, then they usually only allow about six on both sides, so six that agree, to come and speak on the bill. And so anybody can show up to the committee room, and anybody can speak. Is they just get in line and they stand there and they can speak to the committee. about why they're for or against this certain bill, and then the committee can ask follow-up questions to the rep, and that's actually where a lot of the thought and a lot of the, hey, can you change this line when it gets to the house, can you make this different, is it begins in committee. And that's when your bill really gets tested a lot between the house, the committees, the senate, in the attorneys and different people who look at that bill. Is it really gets a lot of look at, and it looks, and it gets a lot of tests to make sure that it's not going to really affect people in a negative way, because once that signature's on it, it's a law.
So, how does a politician's party affiliation or personal beliefs affect the legislative process or the legislation itself?
Yes, that's a great question, because I think a lot of issues you see nowadays that get a lot of media attention are usually very controversial. Usually, the bills that pass that are bipartisan, they hardly get any notice. I know a domestic violence one went through last year and was completely bipartisan. Everybody voted yes, please pass it, but it hardly got any recognition. Where the bill that was passing then was the flag bill, and that was covered like crazy. And so it's very, very sad to see that show come around. But political beliefs do play into certain things. So conservatives, I know Chris Wilson ran a bill last year that helped back off a lot of the government restrictions on small businesses. And he's a small business owner up here in Cache Valley. So that was a personal view he had for years, where he was like, we see this daily. I mean, Chris Wilson is a huge contributor to different things in Cache Valley, and he helps so many small businesses strive just by his small business. And so he does so much for them that he just saw so many restrictions, and so he said he made a bill limiting those restrictions and getting rid of different things that were causing issues. And the Democrats saw that as a way of getting limiting government. So he got a lot of pushback for that from the Democrats, and that was a bill that was party based. Is the Republicans voted yes, and the Democrats voted no. So many bills such as that. That's the one that comes to mind. I'm sure I can think of different ones. Trevor Lee's flag bill. I'm not sure if that's passed completely yet, but when it was in committee, is the Democrats had voted no because they viewed it as an attack on pride flags, and so they voted no on it, where all the Republicans voted yes. So it does play a role when you're politically based, with some issues, and even issues that you don't mean to be politically based sometimes end up that way, or are seen that way.
Here's a good follow up question to that. Um, and that is that how do legislators balance the interests of their constituents or the needs of their constituents as well with their own beliefs or political beliefs?
Yes. So usually, if you're elected, say you're a Democrat or a Republican, usually if you're elected in your area, you represent mostly Democrats or Republicans. So usually the bills you pass are um, a lot they agree with, especially the people that elected you. They agree with a lot. But what I've seen that's really cool is usually people who reach out to their reps and say, "Hey, I have this issue." They're like, "Well, let's sit down and talk about it." And honestly, there's been a few that have become um, bills, and that did become laws, that I know of people reaching out to their reps and just saying, "Hey, I don't like how this is being done, or this restriction, or this law, or this issue is really causing a lot of damage in this area. Could we make this?" And the interesting thing is sometimes they make a law to fix a law, and that's not how it should be. But um, they they a lot of laws help get rid of regulations. I know that's a big thing up here in Cache Valley for farmers that they've done, especially this year and last year, is a lot of the water deeds and a lot of water rights and different things like that that the state had hold of. A lot of reps did a lot of legislation to get rid of those and to get rid of different regulations so farmers could use more water or use um, just not have restrictions on their back is honestly what it was. And so to answer your question is I think a lot of reps do listen to the people. They they're lots of them are friends. Like my friends who are reps, I've had a few issues this year that I've told them I'm like, hey, I think you need to bring this up next year, and we're even in the current process right now about this one issue I've noticed a lot recently that I'm asking a lot of my rep friends to actually take care of and actually make a law and actually fix and do a lot of things next year. But I was a little late in this session to fix and jump on. So a lot of it is them just meeting with friends, neighbors, and people at the store who just have questions and say, hey, this is an issue I've noticed. And, they're just one person. They can't see everything that's going on. And if, if you're a teacher, I'm going to listen to you about issues in education way before I'm going to start jumping on it myself because I'm not there. And so it's different things like that they do listen and that's how they represent their people.
Sometimes it seems like a person and the politicians up on Capitol Hill are there's this great gap between them, and people are just here and politicians are right here, and they're just arbitrarily making laws that X people don't like and some people support. And what is a way to when in reality, basically what you're saying is that is it just takes a phone call, or it just takes a meeting with like you say, with your neighbors, with your friends, or whatever, to say, hey, you know what, I got an idea, or I don't like this, or who can I talk to? And I talk to a representative, or I talk to my so talk about a little bit about dispelling the illusion, if you will, of that distance between regular people and the people up on Capitol Hill.
Yeah. And I have a idea of explaining it, and so kind of bear with me. But when you're a student to a teacher, you feel that gap. You feel they're so much above you, they're so much higher than you, and everything they say goes kind of thing. But the truth is, they're there to work for you. They're there because of you. That they're not if they you're the one that writes their check. And that's the same with reps is they're there for you. They're working for you. It is not because they're higher than you. They are not in a they're not a better person because they're there. They are working for you and you hired them. And so I think a lot, especially the ones I know, we have some really good ones. Casey Snyder, Mike Peterson, Trevor Lee, and different ones that I have personal friendships with. I have seen behind the scenes how much time they take in listening to those who um, who have questions, who have concerns. And I will say Chris Wilson is the best at that. Is he's more of a conservative. He's very very known as a conservative. But the thing that I was just amazed with is when I was sitting in his office, is he'd get hundreds and hundreds of emails out of session, just on a daily basis, and most of them were Democrats saying, "Hey, I have an issue with this bill because you said this or did this or this." And Chris Wilson takes the time to respond. And I was so shocked. Like, usually you'd think, this crazy um, far left person and this right person are speaking with each other. That's not normal in today's America. That's not usually how it goes. Is usually it's fighting you, and especially over email. You think Chris Wilson could just go delete, like he doesn't even need to read the thing. But it is so special to me how he did take the time where he would respond back. He'd say, "Hey, thank you for reaching out. I see your concern with this. This is why I said this. This is why I am doing this. This is why this bill is doing this." And he just, um, not defend himself, but just say what he was seeing and what he was noticing.
The next question is, how can people voice their opinions or their concerns to propose legislation? Because I think you did mention something about that earlier.
Yeah, and I'm even doing that right now where sometimes sometimes there's an issue that really just eats at you. And my biggest thing that bugs the hell out of me is, I'm just gonna say it plain out, is bugs the hell out of me is I have so many family members, especially, who they will sit there and they will complain for hours at Thanksgiving dinner, at Christmas dinner. It doesn't matter where we are. They sit there and they just complain and they bitch and they bitch and it just keeps going on for hours. And it drives me insane. It's one of my biggest pet peeves because I look at them and I said, if you're not going to do a damn thing about it, I don't want to hear your opinion. Is that's it. I'm like, if you're not going to reach out to someone who actually can fix it, or if you're not going to run for mayor yourself, then I don't want to hear a single thing you have to say. And my grandma does that a lot. And, that's why I'm dropping swear words, is because I'm like, I have a personal experience with this. But I have seen family members do that over and over. And the coolest thing is, I have friends and they never ever approach me with, Jayden, I heard you said this, or Jayden, I heard you did this. I always have family who are like, well, I disagree because of da 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 da. Or they'll sit there and watch the news and they're like, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be worked on, this. And I just look at them, I'm like, run for office, shut up and run for office. I don't want to hear it right now. And that is one thing I think so many need to stop doing, is instead of the very first thing you do is, let's go run to social media and let's post about what's bugging us, or let's make a TikTok about something that's going to make us cry. Before you do that, how about you send an email to your rep about this issue that you are seeing and have them fix it? Or maybe even if it's in the county level, send an email to the county executive or the county commissioner, or if you have to send a letter to the mayor, do that. Go meet with them. Go show up on their front door for all I care. But do not sit and bitch to me for hours about the fact that this issue needs changed and they're not going to do a damn thing about it. So,
And I'm just going to play devil's advocate to that, in the interest of um, uh, just broadening the discussion.
yep, go for it.
And that is that a lot of people, maybe I shouldn't say a lot of people, but a portion of the population, will say, that does not trust politicians. They do not trust they either don't vote, or they don't give a crap, or they just figure, nothing I do will make a difference. So it's posting on TikTok, posting on, or they'll say F this politician, or F this, or F that, you know what I'm saying? Instead of doing what you say, which is, reach out to your elected leader. But there is sort of and this has just been a gradual thing where there's been a distrust of politicians, which, I mean, how do you respond to that? How do you reflect on that?
Yeah, it's honest. It's an honest thing. Is um, the one thing, I mean, there's a few things, but one of the things that I'm very known, sorry, very known for in the state of Utah is I will never ever endorse a candidate that I don't like as a person. I have had candidates that come up to me who I completely agree with politically, 100%. But every personal interaction with them I had, I didn't like it. Is if I get this feeling or this gut feeling, being in politics so long, you get these feelings around people, and shaking their hand, visiting with them, even even if you watch, even if you just read them for a few minutes, and you can really get to know someone. And so I have this. That's one thing I'm known for in the state of Utah, is I never ever back a candidate. I'll never endorse a candidate unless I like them as a person. I have to know them personally. I have to know about their family. I have to know about their friends. I have to know about what they like to do. I got to know them personally in order for me to ever endorse them. And that's why people get shocked because, you hear people get up and give political speeches where, um, for example, Phil Lyman will stand up for this, or Trevor Lee will stand up for this, Mike Peterson will do this. And I always get up and I'm like, so I have this story. One day, me and Mike were, and I just start sharing this story about this personal, and it helps. What I've noticed is the tension in people's face when I'm speaking eases and it loosens, and they start to notice, oh, that's a person. Hey, I can relate to that. I like to go on walks with so and so, and I like to go on walks with my friend. I like to do this. And one famous one that I've done a lot, especially this last election cycle, was Tina Cannon, who is now the state auditor. When she was campaigning, is the auditor's office is boring. Even when I hear stories, I'm like, okay, that's nice, but I don't care. And I would get so bored even with but then when they explain it, is it's hard to catch attention, and Tina Cannon's amazing at that. She's amazing at catching people's attention. But I would get up afterwards and they would ask me to speak, and I would say, so when I was struggling with depression and I was struggling with anxiety in the political world, is it was really hard to do political events. And the very first person who called me when the election season was kicking up was Tina Cannon. And she told me, don't you do anything that is going to push you over the limit. And I just shared how she was watching out for me personally. And I shared how when I was struggling, there were certain days that I'd send her a text or I'd be able to talk to her. Same with Chris Wilson, is I'm LDS, and this last year when I was getting ready for a mission, is I was really struggling, and I went into Chris's office and we were having our daily briefing, and we were talking, and I told him, he's like, "Is there anything I can do for you?" Like, because he could tell something was up, and I said, "You know what? Could you give me a blessing?" And he paused all his meetings and said, tell him to wait, and went downstairs with me and did a blessing in the basement of his dealership. And people don't see that side to the political people. They really don't. They just see the political thing to them. And I think that's where a lot of hate and anger builds up, is when you see him just as a person, um, you start to hate him. Where when you start to see him as a dad, a grandpa, a grandma, a mom, you understand that there is a reason to love them. There is a reason to get to know them. And that's one thing I've noticed that really helps me um, trust them more, is when I get to know them, get to know about them. I don't need to know. That's the other thing, is I have never had, the perfect example of this is I have never had a single political conversation with Greg Hughes, but he's a really good friend. And I have never had a conversation with him politically. We've always just talked about family, friends, what's going on in our lives, never talked about politics once. And that's one thing I think is very lacking in the political world. As I tell anybody who wants to, you know, stick it to the other guy, as I said, the best way to defeat your enemy is by making them your friend.
But there's also, to counter that, there's an issue of accessibility as well, because whereas it's accessible for you to reach out to certain politicians, for example, you got, because these politicians also, in their districts or in their areas, also have, at least some of them do, underrepresented people or people who don't speak English. You know what I'm saying? And so, there's communication barriers, there's economic barriers, because a lot of these politicians, they don't go to poor areas. Like, for example, here out in West Valley, they don't go out to that, because a portion of West Valley that's mostly Spanish speaking, so they figured, I mean, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? So getting to know their local representatives either isn't made available or isn't proposed, but something prevents that from happening. So I guess my question is, how can politicians, representatives, senators, whatever, how can they reach out, or maybe educate these segments of the population that they still represent, but they don't reach out to.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's when you say that, I 100% would say that is on the rep or the senator or whoever is in that position, is that's on them, is they should be doing that. Is the one thing Dan Johnson did was he, it was interesting because they, when we would go out and knock doors for him during campaign season, is we would leave door hangers on the door. And it was really unique to see that he would sit there and talk to them. And I had that same thing as they would let me and Dan go out and we'd just sit there and talk to the people. We'd go to their door, we'd shake their hand, we'd visit with them, we'd say, "Do you have any questions?" Or honestly, my biggest thing was I never even asked them if you have any questions. Dan would ask them if they had any questions because he could fix it. My biggest thing was I just told him, I said, "Well, I really like I like this about your house, or like la di da day, or I like this about," and we just start talking about fishing or something, and it would just be a visit with a friend, and then they would say, now that they trust me, they would say, "Well, why do you trust Dan Johnson?" And then you build that relationship, and I think the world is lacking that so much, where it's more of a, "I just need your vote and I'll hear from you next November, I'll reach out to you again." That's really what it is and we have a rep like that that comes to mind that I even struggle with, who, and there's multiple politicians who are like that it's, "I'll hear from you next November," or, "I'll reach out to you next November," but until then you're just another person in my area. And that's what's heartbreaking is. And that's why, honestly, I don't care what party you are, even if you're in my party, is I will 100% say that we need to vote you out if that's how you're going to act. If you're going to, "I'll hear from you next November," I don't want you in that. I don't want you in any elected position. As you need to be engaging with people, you need to be reaching out to people, and especially people you don't agree with. I think I think you should go to those doors. And for example, with yours in West Valley, is I would 100% say, I don't know what the rep is, but I would 100% say they need to go and they need to shake hands. They need to go visit. They need to go knock those doors, and they need to say hi. And if they can't speak English and if they can't speak Spanish, bring an interpreter. That's how important those people should be to you, because they're not just votes; they're people.
So, can you talk about a time when you or a legislator had to support a bill that was unpopular with people, and how did you handle that?
Oh, absolutely. That's I'm like, oh, where do I begin? Okay. um, honestly, the number one that comes to mind is, for sure, the number one. I know there's more, but the number one that's kind of just beating up my head is, this recent bill that Trevor Lee made about the only American flags allowed in schools. And what was interesting was when I brought it up to people that I was going down to speak on it, because Trevor Lee's a really good friend of mine, and he asked me to go down and speak on it. Is it was really interesting to me as I brought it up with people. They were like, "Oh, is that not already a law?" And I'm like, "No." And so there were a lot of people. There was a lot of mixed. It was a lot of people who were like, "Well, I thought that was already a law. Or that should be a law." But that was one that we definitely got pushback over. And I understand the reasoning for the pushback was they believed that it was just to target gay flags, but it was to target all of them. It was banning of Trump flags in schools. It was the banning of police flags in schools. It was making it that only the American flag and the state of Utah flag were flown in the schools, because schools shouldn't be a political place. It shouldn't be somewhere that someone feels they're getting something shoved down their throats. They got 12 years of peace that they need to enjoy. Once they get out of high school, promise you, the political world will come shove something down your throat. So don't worry about showing or expressing your opinion those 12 years. Take that breath and enjoy it while you have it. But that was one that we definitely got a lot of pushback from the public. I know Trevor got a lot of hit, but with mine is I even had quite a few people reach out to me after I spoke on the bill about how I went down and I just said my, the reason I was supporting the American flag. That was my only reason. I didn't once mention I don't think we should do this. I don't think blah, 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 blah. As it was just I don't believe schools should be political, and I even got pushed back over that, and that was a very tense room. Is standing there defending that belief was very tense. Is you could feel it in that room, and it was standing out. So that was definitely a bill. There's been quite a few, but that one definitely comes to my mind in your question.
So, in your view, what is the most important function of a state legislature?
To represent the people is 100%. Is it's to represent the people. It's to show the people that they have a voice. It's to show the people that they're seen and they're known, and that they're cared for. Is that's really what it is. Is it's for you to have that voice. Is you can't exactly just all of a sudden reach up and say, "Hey, I want to meet with the governor." We're not in those days anymore where you can go show up to the door and be like, "I'll be in the governor's next meeting when he's got a minute." And but there that's really where your voice lies is the reps is your first level, and then your senator, and then you can reach out to the governor and you can speak to him on different things, but that's really where it starts. Is it's your reps, and it's those people represent your voice. And so that's the number one thing I think we have a legislator at all, is to represent the people, to voice the opinions of the people.
So, with that, what are some of the biggest challenges facing state legislatures today?
Okay, I would say definitely definitely in Utah is we're not like the rest of the nation. Is the rest of the nation is way more divided, and like we said, is that's why I love how you're doing this. I love, as I shared with you, how much I love how you're doing this independent journalism, is because in the public journalism is it is constantly negative bullshit one time after another, and it's just over and over and over, and people get so sick of that. That's why people hate politics, is because they see that negative over and over. Where nobody saw that bipartisan bill about domestic violence get passed. Nobody saw that. They just see the negative, and it's over and over, and it's really sad, and it's disgusting. But that's what the national news in particular shows too. Is just the horrific and terrible things that are happening. You never hear about one positive damn thing in the world. And there's this song that comes to mind that's always like, some one of these days I just want to turn on the news and hear about a county fair. That's what I want to do. Is one of these days I just want to turn on the news and hear about a county fair. And I think that's the one. I think that's the biggest issue facing the Utah legislator, is people are seeing it as the rest of the state, that, oh, this is just like the people in Congress. They're not going to want to hear from me. They're not representing me. I don't trust them. These are actually your people. The reps are the people. They are the ones who, they are in your same grocery store. Me and my rep, we're in the we're in the we pass each other all the time, just walking around, and you you see each other at stores. You see each other at different events where you don't see congressmen going down to the people like that. You don't see senators above, not the state senators, but the other senators. You don't see them visiting people. You don't ever see that. But the reps, they are just people. They are down to earth firefighters, police officers, teachers, people who just want to make a difference in the world.
This goes back to the earlier statement that we had made about trust, because, and again, sort of a push for independent journalism here, um, where,
Oh, for sure. I'm all for it.
oh, me too, believe me, trust me, me too. I, where it's, you have uh, corporate news, corporate owned news, um, portray the sort of, politicians are battling against people, right, narrative, when, as you've explained based on your experience, that it's just about discussion. At least here in Utah, I don't know about some other states. I know sometimes California can be quite combative in their legislature, but I know here in Utah, at least, uh, it's very different, and how that affects, the public perception of politicians, whether it's Chris Wilson or somebody else. You know what I'm saying? I mean, uh, um, maybe talk about that, the role of media in this. How have they contributed to the, I guess you can say, to the public perception of politicians and legislatures and laws that are being passed.
Yeah, and that's a great question too, because the biggest thing is, and you see that all the time with public media, is it's always negative. It's always negative, and that's why I'm 100% for this individual journalism, is because you're just like the reps. You're just a daily guy who wants to know facts, who cares about people and cares about others and wants them to have the answers that you can have. And that's why I support it 100%, because then you see the big media outlet where it's like, well, submit this news story, and if we get time, we'll get to you. Oh, we'll see if we can reach out to you. Oh, that's not negative enough. We don't want to publish that. Where the minute someone's shot, they're there and they're like, oh, we're standing right outside the scene where, and it's just like negative after negative. And that's the same with politics. Is they don't ever report the good that goes on. They always report the negative. And they, if they can get this negative initiative on this one rep or on this senator, they'll take it and they'll run with it for months on months on months. And they'll just publicize that the entire time. They'll never share about those incredible bills that are actually making a difference in people's lives. Those bullshit political ones that are just raising, and sure, politically you might want them passed, but they're really just political. They're just, those bills are the ones that get publicized, where the bills that really affect people, those domestic violence ones, those ones that are going to save lives, those ones that give funding to different nonprofits who are saving lives, those are the ones that make a difference. And you hardly hear the media cover any of that.
This is quite true. And I'm just, again, conversationally speaking, I'm following a bill. There's a few bills that I'm following for a story that I did previously, but there is one bill, which is House Bill 432, that I'm following, which is the, like, an electronic cigarette bill. Um, I have a friend who works at a vape shop. I used to vape, I used to smoke, I used to vape. No, I don't do either. And no one's paying any attention to that. That's people's livelihoods. That's people's livelihoods. My friend's probably going to lose his job if, what I'm saying, if this bill fails. And it's all based on misinformation. I'm hopefully going to be able to do a story on that. But yeah. And there's a couple of gun legislation bills. I haven't heard one peep about gun legislation.
You were the very first journalist I heard talk about it at all this session.
Really? Nobody said anything to you about.
I haven't heard a single thing. Even at the Capitol Hill, I haven't heard a single thing. You were the very first person who brought it up.
How about that? Well, what do you know? I mean, again, a push for independent journalism, 100%, 100%. So we're going to shift and talk, because we've talked about media. So now we're going to talk about, or rather, expand on that and talk about technology with regards to social media and other forms of technology, and see how that affects the legislative process. What have you seen, or maybe what do you think, or not what do you think, but how is it affecting it?
Yeah, that's one thing. Anybody who wants to get elected nowadays is from a campaign perspective, is I will 100% say I've been on 15 campaigns now, and I will 100% say you need to be social media engaged. You have to have social media if you want to reach young voters. Is young voters are sick of the negative too. They're sick of hearing the negative daily about politics that they don't turn on the news anymore. I I don't know a single um, teenager who picks up a newspaper. I can't I can't find any, but they don't get their news that way. They get social media, and when you have people sharing on their story about this cool event they went to and they got to meet this senator or this rep or anything like that, or have this discussion with them, is that's really where it's at. I did a post this morning about the how I previously mentioned I'm reaching out to a few of my reps and a few of my friends who are doing the about passing this bill in the future and making it a law. And you don't hear that. And the minute I posted it on social media, it just erupted where texts come through and different things like that were coming through about well, have you seen this side and this side and this thing? And that's really where the where it's all at is um, it's just a big it's just a big issue that's where teenagers get their that's where they get their information is social media is they just get info that way, and it can be positive and it can be negative. If you're following the actual senator and he posts, hey, this is an event I went to, this is something I did, and that's what helps too is through social media you can see that they're engaged. Like my mom wasn't involved at all with social media, but she would be like, wow, Dan Johnson's going like to all these events, he's doing all these things like all the time. And that stands out to people when they know that you're in it, when they know that you're showing up. And that's really, really important nowadays in the social media world we live in. But then social media can also be negative, and it can also be someone showing up to an event and just shaking hands and then kissing babies and taking a picture and then leaving. And so when you have other people who are sharing pictures of the person actually there sitting engaged and visiting with people, it speaks a lot to people. An image is worth 1,000 words where that you couldn't say in a campaign speech.
Just to wrap up, is there anything else that you want to mention or talk about that we haven't mentioned that you maybe feel needs to be brought out?
Um, I loved all your questions. I thought they were perfectly put together, and I thought they were awesome. And you never hear any single public media ask someone that. So I really appreciate the questions, and I thought they were great. Though that is one thing I really enjoyed talking about too is the personal view of the different people in politics that you can see, and that's very special. And the fact that they are your voice and that you are the Constitution starts with we the people. It is us. It is about us, and that's the end. There's no this rep's bigger than me, this congressman's bigger than me, this senator's bigger than me, this president's bigger than me. They work for you. They work for you. You're paying and you're writing their checks. Same with teachers is same story is you show up. And I always got mad at teachers who would say, don't waste my time. No, you're here for me. You're here for me. And we write your check. And so that's the same with reps and the same with senators is they work for you and they are your voice, and that I would 100% encourage people to reach out. That's one thing that I'm actually going to work on. I'm starting a service mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, my very final political act is I am reaching out to the governor and different legislators and different friends in politics and passing a bill against an issue that we've seen so much um, rise, and it's just been friends. I served on seminary council, and the number one thing that we saw was this kind of relates to the social media is youth sharing sexual images, and that was becoming a huge issue and becoming a daily thing. And there's been many bills actually passed to prevent um, teenagers and minors reaching on to pornography sites and different things like that. And there was an issue that one friend brought up to me a few months ago where she said Jayden, I had, and that was one thing that was so special on seminary council was being able to help them, being able to help them take that turn, being able to help them see that usually lustful behaviors, sexual behaviors, and different behaviors like that is related to mental, physical, emotional. It's something, an issue at home, an issue in a relationship. It's way beyond just I want to get on my phone and I want to send this picture. It's way beyond that, and it's very personal. And so being able to help the youth turn their life around and being able to see that they were doing this for a different reason, and the reason I'm reaching out to the governor and different legislators and different friends in politics is because she shared with me when she received her when she got turned into the police for sharing images, and they were both minors sharing it back and forth, is that went on her record. And not just that, is they had middle-aged male officers looking at her sexual pictures, looking at every picture she had sent. And to me, that is wrong. That is completely disgusting. And I told the governor in a letter, I said, that itself is sharing child pornography. I don't give a shit who you are. I don't care if you're looking at that for investigating. Is sharing of child pornography. And then we have these multiple stories arising up in the state of Utah of officers actually sharing those images to their personal cell phones and saving those images. And that is absolutely disgusting and needs to stop now. And the way I'm taking the next step is I'm just simply, rather than going to social media or TikTok and posting about it, very first thing I did was I wrote a letter to the governor, and then I reached out to my friends who are in the House of Representatives. And because this session is becoming coming to an end, and they weren't able to make it a law this session, but we are working on it for next session that this needs to be addressed. But the reason I wrote the governor is because I believe he needs to take an executive order in doing this now. It can't wait another year of this happening. This needs to end now, and this needs to work on now. And that's one thing that stands out about you is you actually would cover this story. I guarantee you, not a single damn news station would ever reach out about this.
I would absolutely cover this. And whenever you have more information, or if you have other people that you want to bring into the conversation, I'm happy to speak with them too. So whenever you're ready to talk about this, I'm here. And we'll be covering this here on the line.info for you. Absolutely.
See, and that's why I love you. I hate KSL and all the rest, but I love you.
Well, thank you. I try to do my best. I'm just sort of a one man team for now, but hopefully, we can make that grow. So, with that all said, we've been speaking with Jayden Laursen, an active member of the political community here in Utah with experience in both local and state politics. Jayden, it's been an absolutely wonderful time having speaking with you. Thank you for take, Thank you for taking the time to be here today and to share your experience with us. TheLine.Info is not monetized. If you enjoy what you see here and would like to support this channel, please consider making a donation. Your support makes it possible to produce more great videos. Thank you.